We're in Hebrews 6 this morning. Let me ask you, when you're going through something difficult, how do you get through it? That's not a rhetorical question. You can chime in. When you're going through something hard, what gets you through it? What gets you to the other side? Did you say swearing? You know, okay. So swearing, praying, good answer. Sleep.
I'm just going to forget about it. Go to bed.
Just hibernate until the problems take care of themselves. Okay. All right. Time heals all. What else? Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, you're welcome to call me, but I see how it is. I mean. I understand. As he should be. If I was your first instead of him, that would be a problem. Matt's back there. There's a number of ways I could interpret.
All I can hear is you and not her conversation.
Oh, just all good things. Don't worry.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Yeah, when we're struggling, there's different things that we do to get through it, right? We need supportive people, don't we? We need God's support. We need help, right? We need somebody to comfort us. We need somebody to reassure us, to have our back. That goes a long way. Somebody just to hear us out, to just vent, just get it all out. Yeah. And there's different things that we do to try to kind of not think about it for a while or kind of numb the pain or what have you, that some things that are maybe healthier than others, right? You might just sleep. You might swear. You might, like a certain someone said. I won't say who. Right.
I agree with that one.
So next week we're going to preach about swearing. We're about language. No, but I mean, there's other things we do. We do, for me, a big one in my life is food. Food and TV, right, are a way that I can escape, that I can make myself feel better when I'm going through a difficult time, right? We have all kinds of behaviors, some healthier than others, right? It might be something addictive in nature, right? We have different things that we do to try to escape what we're feeling, to escape the difficulty we're going through, at least just not think about it for a while, right? Just a way to cope. Just a way to not feel the pain and the burden of it all the time, right? You know what another thing is that we need that allows us to get through hard times is the expectation that it won't be this way forever. We refer to that as hope. In order to get through the struggle that you're going through right now at any given time, in order to get through, you need to have some idea that it won't be like this forever. And all of us have felt that way before, where you had something that was difficult, right? It was like, okay, this is hard, but if I can just get through this, then blank, right? There's something on the other side that's going to make this worth it. It's not always going to be like this. It's just like this for now, but we're going to get there, right? And there's other things that we go through where we don't feel any hope. And you know how that makes us feel? That makes us feel trapped. It makes us despair. It makes us depressed. It makes us think, well, it's just always going to be this way. It's never going to get better. Like, when you start to believe that, you're like, oh, this isn't a thing that's just going to be over, like, quickly. This is going to be a thing, right? I went through this process with COVID. When, back in 2020, maybe you had an experience similar to me, when, like, you're first hearing the rumblings about it, and it's like, oh, yeah, just like the bird flu or whatever, here's the latest, greatest one, and then, as time goes on, it's like, oh, like whatever I believe about this is actually going to affect my life, like whatever this virus is, whether it's as bad as they're saying it is or whatever, like this is actually going to change everything. Like, wow, oh boy, this is going to be a rough couple of weeks, people are going to lock down and yeah, it's like, man, this is going to be a crazy couple of weeks. Oh, this is going to be like a crazy month. Wow. Oh, okay, well, it's going to be another month, but like, then the summer's coming and it's going to really lighten up in the summer, right? Like oh, okay, this isn't going away. This might just be the way things are for the rest of my life. Like, it was just like, And it was naive, to think that it was going to only take a couple weeks or that it was going to take a month or a couple months or whatever. Like, of course it wasn't going to be like that. And like in retrospect, to me now it seems really obvious, but at the time, I was just like, going along with it, I was just like, oh wow, like I really didn't grasp how long it was going to be. And in my mind, I always had like, it's going to be a problem for this short amount of time, and then we're going to get to the other side. And that was always true. There was always going to be a time where, like, well, here it is. It's just like, it's like the flu, it's like the cold, it's part of our lives now, for better or worse. It's entered into the system, but hopefully we got some herd immunity going on, and it's not going to be, we don't have to worry about flattening the curve and, all that other stuff, like, and maybe, vaccines and whatever else, like whatever we can do to mitigate it and things like that. So like, there was always going to be that point where it's not going to be the international crisis that it was at that point in time. But sometimes what we do when we go through a hard time is we have hope in something, but it's something that's not going to do it for us, right? Or it's hope in like the wrong thing. Another example, I worked for a few years at a bank. Like I went to school to be a pastor. Since I was 17 years old, I knew I wanted to be in the ministry. I went to school to be a pastor. I worked as a pastor. And then, long story short, I entered a season of my life where I went into the secular workforce so that I could, be involved in this church plant here in Monroe. And long story short, basically, I ended up feeling really stuck. I spent about 5 years working a few different jobs at different times, and constantly, the entire time, literally for 5 years, I worked most of that time at a bank. And I had, at any given time, I had the expectation of, well, there's this church that's looking for a pastor, and I think I'm going to get that job. Like, I always had something in mind that I thought, like, okay, I don't like this job. I don't like where I'm at, but soon I'm going to be back into the career I want to have, right? And I constantly had that expectation. And then guess what? It didn't pan out, right? When I first started at the bank, I remember there was this one particular. Actually, there were a couple of churches that I was applying for positions at, and I really, had a really good interview and like felt like things were going well, and it didn't pan out. And then something else came up later that year, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is a good opportunity. This is going to lead somewhere, and then it didn't pan out. And then it was like a series of these things, or sometimes it would be like not even just a church job, but just like a job that seemed like it would be better than the job I was in, right? And just like better job all around, and like not killing me the same way the bank job was. And like every single time it was like, it felt like every door got slammed in my face, right? And how did I get through it? Like, it was miserable working at the bank for a lot of reasons. I won't get into all of it. I've spent, the past 2 years complaining to you guys about my job at the bank, and now I'm full-time with Crosswalk, and it's great. Thank you for that. But like, so I won't bore you with it again. But I went through like 5 years of always thinking, yeah, this isn't great now, but soon I'm going to be out of here and it won't be my problem anymore. And then that never happened. But I just went in this cycle of setting my hope on something that didn't work, and setting my hope on something that didn't work. So just going through like the hope and the disappointment over and over again. But I went through seasons where I was just like, okay, so what? Nothing's ever going to pan out for me? This is just my life? I work at a bank for the rest of my life? Really? Is that it? Am I really going to be stuck here forever? Man, that's depressing. When you have that kind of mindset, when you have something that's just hanging over you all the time and you feel like it's never going to get better, man, it's hard to get out of bed in the morning. It's hard to function. It's hard to do anything. You start instead of having energy to do things, you start just like scrounging and scraping and trying to grasp at something that you can have control over, right? Just something to make you feel good, something that I can get because I want it and it'll help me feel better. Right? Like you're just trying to find, like, and so you'll grab at whatever you can find, whatever fleeting thing that you think is going to make you feel better, because like, what other option do you have? And you know what? Can I just say, like, some people approach their entire life that way. Like when it comes to questions of like, what's this life all about? What does it mean? Why are we here? Where did we come from? Is there a God? A lot of people would answer that question with like, nope. I think the most logical thing is that there's just nothing, that there's no meaning in life, there's no purpose, there's no value, right? And so there's no objective truth even, there's no whatever, like there's no God, there's no purpose in life, you just do what you do and then you die, right? And that's how a lot of people see the world. Now, there are really good reasons not to see the world that way, and if you want to talk more about that, we should talk about that, right? But let me just say, by the way, like, can I point out the fact that if there is no meaning and purpose in life, why does it bother us so much? Why would we evolve the ability to really want there to be purpose and meaning in life when there isn't? It doesn't seem like a great survival skill, but anyway, that's another conversation. But some people go their whole life believing that there is no hope, that there's no purpose, that there's no meaning, that this life, if it's hard, good luck, that's just life for you. And maybe I can do something to make my life more enjoyable, but at the end of the day, the most I can get out of life is just to feel good, is just to have fun, is just to try to be happy as much as possible, because soon I'm going to die and it'll all be over. So I got to make the most of this time here. And can I just say, sometimes we as Christians, we get influenced by that in our culture. And sometimes we live that way too. I heard this analogy recently from another pastor. He was saying, like, you know when you go to these Marvel movies that were coming out for a while, now they're just all coming out on Disney Plus. I don't know, I don't even follow it anymore. But like, that for a while, like, I don't know if you're like a moviegoer, but like you go to see one of these superhero movies, and what do they always do at the end of the credits? Bonus scene. Thank you. I was like, somebody has seen a Marvel movie. Come on, somebody tell me. Yeah, there's a bonus scene. Right, so like they started coming out with these movies. It starts with Iron Man, and they come out with this whole series of superhero movies, and they all build on each other. And but every single movie they do this thing where at the end of the credits there's a bonus scene, and it's going to be some teaser for the movie that's going to come out in 2 years, and then by the time that movie comes out, you'll have forgotten it. But at the moment, it's like, whoa, what's that? The comic book nerds are like, that's whatever. What's his face? But like they would do this, and so a lot of people go through life. Even if we believe in God and we believe that there's something Luke, are you raising your hand?
Yeah. At the end of the Super Mario movie, Cherry Yoshi acting.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, see, now it's a thing. Now, like, every movie does it. Like, I do that. I haven't been to a movie theater in a very long time because I have children. But, like, every time I go to a movie theater now, since these Marvel movies started, like, I sit through the credits till the end, just in case, because you never know. Like, there might be something. And I paid for the ticket. I'm going to get my money's worth. Anyway, but a lot of people go through life, even if you believe there's something at the end of this, if you're a Christian and you believe, I'm going to go through this life and at the end, I'm going to be with God forever. Even if you believe that, a lot of us go through life like life is the movie and heaven is just the after credits bonus scene, right? It's like, yeah, it's going to be all right, but this life is where it's really at. We got to get through this life. Right? And then this life is where, like, I don't want to miss out on experiences, right? I want to have a good life. I want to be happy. I want to enjoy myself. I want to have a good life now. And then, yeah, there's going to be something after, right? But it's kind of an afterthought, right? Where the way the Bible talks about it, what Christianity has always taught, like, what's at the core of this is, like, no, guys, this life is just the previews. This is the trailers for other movies. When we get to be with God for all eternity, that's the movie, that's the main event. And everything that we go through in life right now is just leading up to that. So let's get into the word today. We're going to elaborate on this some more. So we're in Hebrews chapter 6. We're going to pick up in verse 13. So just to recap, right? So the author of Hebrews has been using all this Old Testament imagery and alluding to these things to make different points about how Jesus is superior and you need to hold on to Jesus and don't give up on him, right? Jesus is better in every way. He's worth holding on to. And if we hold on to him, there's rest, there's a promise, there's a reward waiting for us on the other side. And he goes on to say, he's like, now here's the thing, even as I tell you this, I'm having a hard time because I know that some of you guys I'm writing to can't handle this. Because you've been following Jesus for a while and you should be more mature in your faith, but you're acting like the spiritual version of infants. You're still on milk, you're still on mushed peas instead of solid food like a big kid. Right? You should be growing, you should be moving forward in your faith. You should be closer to Jesus today than you are. Right? And he's like, and I know you're going to get there, but some of you guys need to hear this, that he's writing to. He says, some of you guys just need to hear this, that you are not as mature as you should be by now. You need to take your faith more seriously. And related to that, what happens when you have a weak and childish and immature faith is you are prone to fall away from Jesus. Because your faith is not very strong yet. You're just a baby. You can't live out there in the real world on your own yet. Right? And so last week we talked about this very sobering warning, this statement about like, hey, be careful. Because there is a line, I don't know where that line is, but there is a line where if you drift away from Jesus and you cross this line, you're not ever going to come back. Not because God wouldn't take you, but because you just won't do it. At that point, it's a lost cause. And not like we need to diagnose anybody about where their line is or whether they're there. That's absolutely not the answer. It's just for us personally to take seriously of when I get into a habit where I am drifting away from God, where I am not actively drawing near to God, I need to be cautious about that, because if I do too much of that for too long, where is it going to lead? Away from God, obviously. But when we find ourselves in that drift, we need to correct course. We need to get back on the saddle, right? And even as he says that, he's like, but I'm convinced of much better things for you. I know for you guys that I'm writing to, you're gonna get there. And I'd say the same to all of you. It's like, but yes, I know that's not gonna be us. Be warned that it could be you. But I'm confident it won't be you. And he goes on, with that in mind, he goes on in verse 13, he says, when God made his promise to Abraham, since there was no one greater for him to swear by, he swore by himself, saying, I will surely bless you and give you many descendants. And so after waiting patiently, Abraham received what was promised. People swear by someone greater than themselves, and the oath confirms what is said and puts an end to all argument, because God wanted to make the unchanging nature of his purpose very clear to the heirs of what was promised. He confirmed it with an oath. God did this so that, by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled to take hold of the hope set before us may be greatly encouraged. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. It enters the inner sanctuary behind the curtain, where our forerunner Jesus has entered on our behalf. He has become a high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Right? So now what's that whole thing about Melchizedek? We're going to talk more about that next week, okay? We're getting there. He keeps like making little mentions of Melchizedek, and I keep like glossing over it because like we're going to get into it when we get there. Chapter 7 is really going to focus on that. Right? But here's the point he's making. He says, okay, think about, he's writing to people who know their Old Testament pretty well. You might not, and that's okay. So way back when, there was this guy Abraham, and God made some promises to Abraham. Promises about what God was going to do for Abraham, but also through Abraham to bless the whole world. God was giving Abraham and all of his descendants after him a mission. He was saying, you are going to be my special covenant people. We are going to have a special relationship that the other people groups of the world don't have, so that the other people groups of the world can have it too. I'm going to draw you closer to me in a special way so that you can draw people into that orbit, so that they will return to knowing their Creator that they've wandered away from and rebelled against. And that was the mission that he gave to Abraham and his descendants after him. And that is where the nation of Israel comes from, the people group of Israelites, of Jews, where they come from. They descend from this guy Abraham. Right? And so God made these promises to them, to Abraham. There's this moment, if you know the story, where Abraham almost sacrifices his son Isaac to God. Anybody know that story? Yeah. Great story, kind of crazy, right? Right after that, this is the part that he quotes. Right after that, what God does is God makes an oath to Abraham, and he swears by his own name, right? So this is a thing we don't have as much in our culture. But in many cultures, especially this particular culture in ancient times, how did you know that you could trust somebody to do what they said they were going to do? How did you know? Well, one fail-safe was honor. This is a culture that values honor and shame. That there are things you care about in life, like money and stuff and people and things that you want. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is, do people honor you, or do they see you as shameful? Right? And there are a lot of cultures today where that is fundamentally, that's the question of life. And sometimes it's more personalized, like Japan is a bit more individualized. But like mostly, especially in Middle Eastern cultures, for example, there is a high value on, are you bringing honor to your family, or are you bringing shame to your family? right? And that's the big question. Are you, and that was very much this culture. Everything you say and do, it's not you doing it. You are a representative of your family, of your people, of your group, of your tribe. And the way that you act makes your family look good or makes your family look bad. And when you have a child misbehaving, you can tell somebody comes from one of these cultures because if they're a parent and they see their kid out of line, what they'll say is something along the lines of, "You are making our family look bad. You are bringing shame on our family," right? Or you see somebody else's kid acting up, you can say, "What is your mother going to say if I tell her what you've been doing," right? Like, I'm going to tell your parents takes on a whole new meaning. It's like, oh no, my whole family is going to be shamed, and that means something to our family. So that was part of it. So here's the thing, somebody could say an oath, and if they break their oath, that's shameful. You just don't do that, right? Not if you're smart. If, like, you'd be ostracized by everybody in your community, right? How shameful. Like, people would laugh at you. People would mock and deride you. You'd be an outcast. You don't want to do that. You want to bring honor to your family, not shame, right? Now, people still did that, and there were consequences socially for that, right? And sometimes the things that you get honor for versus shame for are not exactly the right things in any given culture, right? But there's another fail-safe in this world. Let's say that I make an oath to you, but I'm going to swear on something, right? So you ever heard somebody say, or maybe you've said, like, "I swear on my mother's grave," right? Why do we say that? Yeah, absolutely. It's a very deep promise. It's like if I'm lying to you right now, if I don't do the thing that I said and I break this agreement, it's like I am dishonoring my mother, right? And I'm saying that because that's something that actually would mean something to me, right? You wouldn't say that unless you had a high opinion of your mother, or you're lying, right? So, or like we still see this, as kids on the playground. What do you say? Cross my heart, hope to die, right? Exactly, right? Why do we say that? Well, it's yeah, it's like if I don't do, if I'm lying, if it turns out that I was lying, right? Then, like, those are things that could be done to me, is what you're saying. It's like if I don't do what I say, now nobody's going to do that, I hope, on your playground, but like, yeah, but that was the thing. People would do in this culture. They would swear by something important and meaningful that would make you say, wow, well, you wouldn't swear by that and then, like, not keep your word. Man, like, I mean, you got to have some kind of respect for something, right? Or you'd say, and you see this all the time in the Old Testament, like, may God do whatever to me. Or if they weren't like Israelites, if they worship, pagan deities, right? Like, may the gods do such and such to me if I break the oath I've made to you, right? This was a common way of doing things. Or very often you would swear by someone as a way of, you would have witnesses. It's like, this was the agreement. This was what we agreed to, and there are witnesses here who will verify. If one of us says, you broke our deal, you broke our agreement, the witnesses can chime in and say, oh yeah, we were there, you totally broke it, or no, he's full of it, you didn't break it, right? So there's different elements to this, but there was a whole system, there was a whole procedure in different ancient cultures about how you go about making an oath, how you go about assuring somebody that you're going to keep your end of the deal. Now, we live in a paper world today, and more like a paperless paper world, like a digital paper world now, where we have contracts, right? We have laws and we have contracts and we have everything written down somewhere, right? And so we use that as like the standard. But the problem is, like, we don't have, in our culture, we don't value a sense of personal honor in the same way, which has its pros and cons, but like, in our culture, it's like, I make a contract with you, but I can find a lawyer to get me out of it, right? Or I can put loopholes in a contract, or I can find some way to squirrel around it, right? And sometimes that's what we celebrate, what we prize in American culture today, right? And that's not a great thing, right? But we don't always have like a personal sense of honesty and integrity, and like, now I'm not talking about you guys, but I'm talking about our culture at large, right? Like that it's not about like, well, I'm going to do it because I said I would, and that's the right thing to do. I'm going to do it because I'm a follower of Jesus, and it makes Jesus look like a liar if I lie. Right? I'm going to do it because it's important, because it's right. We don't do it for those reasons. We do it because we have to, because we're contractually obligated, and if we can find a way out of it, we will. Right? That's just very much how our culture sees these kinds of things. So it's a foreign concept to us. But right here, God, speaking to Abraham, knowing exactly who he's talking to in Genesis 22, In what kind of culture Abraham's in, and the way his mind works, God says, I've made you a promise, and I know you are having a hard time believing that I'm going to do it. So Abraham, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to swear an oath to you. I'm going to get down on your level and do something that you humans do to reassure each other. I'm going to swear an oath to you. But, as the author of Hebrews points out here, it's like, well, what's God going to swear by? Like, or who's going to be the witness of God's oath? Right? That like, hey, if I do this, you can do this to me. The witnesses will say I lied. It's like, well, what are you going to do? He's God. Right? So what does God do? God swears by himself. He's like, I promise you, in my own name, with myself as the witness, here's what I will do. There are 3 times in the Old Testament that we see God do this. One is in Psalm 110, and the other is when God promises to David that his throne will be established forever, right? And then the other time is this time with Abraham. So this is what the author of Hebrews is referring to. And here's what we're getting at. Let's bring it back. Like, this is all going somewhere, I promise you. So he says, when God made his promise to Abraham, since there was no one greater for him to swear by, he swore by himself, saying, I will surely bless you and give you many descendants. And so, here's the kicker, after waiting patiently, Abraham received what was promised. People swear by someone greater than themselves, and the oath confirms what is said and puts an end to all argument. Because God wanted to make the unchangeable nature of his purpose very clear to the heirs of what was promised, he confirmed it with an oath. God did this so that by 2 unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled to take hold of the hope set before us may be greatly encouraged. Right? So what he's saying is, God wanted Abraham to know, like, I mean it. And if you know the life of Abraham, you understand why Abraham needed that reassurance, because he repeatedly doubted that God was going to do the things that God had promised him. And he struggled at times to be patient and to wait on God. But ultimately, God made a promise and God fulfilled that promise, and Abraham saw that promise fulfilled. That is how it turned out. But God, to reassure him, took an oath to say, by my own name, and there is no higher name, I promise to you that this is what will happen. Right? And so he says, the author of Hebrews says, by 2 unchangeable things, the 2 things he's talking about are God made a promise, and God confirmed that promise with an oath. God added an extra layer of promise on top of the promise, just to say, in a way that made sense in Abraham's culture and in the culture of the people the author of Hebrews is writing to, just to say as clearly as possible, you can trust me, I'm going to do it. You really can take my word for it. I know people say that all the time, and it's not true, but I'm not like that because I am God, and when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And if I make a promise to you, you can count on that promise. You can take that to the bank. And so, with this in mind, he says, we have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. It enters the inner sanctuary behind the curtain where our forerunner Jesus has entered on our behalf. He has become a high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Now he's mixing metaphors here. What is an anchor for? It's okay, this isn't a Bible knowledge question. This is nautical. Yeah.
Just like laying stuff down.
Yeah. Matt, you spent time around boats. What's an anchor for?
Throw people overboard with.
Throw people overboard with.
So hold your boat.
Exactly. That's definitely the image we should have here.
Yep.
Right. Right. No, an anchor, what does it do? It keeps you from moving. Right? Sometimes you're on a boat and you want to move, so you don't want an anchor down, right? Sometimes you want your boat to stay in one place and not go anywhere. So what do?
You put an anchor down.
You put an anchor down. Something heavy, something that is going to grip the earth at the bottom of the water, that's not just going to slip and slide around, that's going to grab onto something that's going to be heavy enough, that's going to be whatever, that it is going to keep your boat from moving, right? Or you like tie up to a dock or something, right? The same kind of way. Like, I want to do something to make sure this isn't going to go somewhere, right?
A long rope.
Yes. So like an anchor is designed to keep something from drifting away, to keep it in one place. It needs to be something trustworthy and secure. Now he's mixing that metaphor with another metaphor, right? Some of you guys know in ancient times, the Israelites had a temple where they would go to worship God, and the temple had 3 different basic areas. There was the outer court, right? There was where the sacrifices were being offered, and then there was the holy place. And there's a special room that only the priests are allowed to go in, and only under specific circumstances and at specific times, right, to offer sacrifices to God. And then within the holy place, there was the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies, right? And this was a place that nobody gets to go except one person, the high priest, who's the head of all the priests, who goes in there once a year on the Day of Atonement to make atonement for the people of Israel. And there are very specific requirements of what he's got to do before he goes in. It's this whole thing. If he does it wrong, God says he's going to strike him dead, right? So like, you better get it right, buddy, you know? Right? So the high priest is the only one that goes in there, and only once a year, and only under certain circumstances. The rest of the time, nobody's allowed in there, because that is where God's presence is in a way that he is not anywhere else, is the idea, right? This is a place where God is present in a way that you could not handle. If you were in God's presence in that way, it would kill you, right? You better offer a bull sacrifice first and come with God's permission, or else you're not going to survive in there, in the presence of God, right? So here's what he's saying. We have this hope. And he's saying, you know what this hope is like? This hope is like an anchor. And the rope is tied to us, but the anchor is in the Holy of Holies, so that we cannot drift too far from God's presence. He says, our hope in God fulfilling the promises he's made to us is what keeps us from drifting away, because as long as we hold on to that hope is like a rope that is attached to an anchor, and that anchor is firm and secure in God's presence. And as long as I am holding on to that rope, I cannot drift far from God's presence. That is what he's saying. God has made, just like to Abraham, just like to many people before in history, God has made promises to you and me. And as long as we maintain our hope that God will keep his promises, we will stay close to God. As long as we keep our hope, we will not drift away from him. As he just spent all this time talking about, like, you need to grow up. Be careful that you don't drift away. He wants to reassure them and say, but here's the thing, guys. You're not going to drift away as long as you don't forget the hope we have. As long as you hold on to the hope that at the end of all this, God will keep his promises. You will not drift away. Life will be challenging, but you will not be lost. You might wander from God, but you will not wander far, as long as you hold on to that hope. Now, what is that hope? What are we talking about? What is the hope? What has God promised to us? This is an open question. What has God promised to us today? Is everlasting life. Izzy, you had your... It's all right. Yeah. Okay, so God has promised us everlasting life. He's promised us everlasting love, right? Love that's unconditional. What else has God promised us? 50 grand in chocolate. Okay. That's a very specific, idiosyncratic situation right there. It's not in the Bible. Does God promise us an easy life?
No.
Does God promise us that if we just follow him, all of our problems will go away? Does God promise that he'll give us lots of money and everything will go well for us and we'll never have any problems ever again?
No, but only in heaven.
Right, like God has made promises, but the promises are not for like immediately solving all our problems right now the way we ask for. What God has promised is that he's going to be with us, right? Like Jesus said in Matthew 28, surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age, right? That God has promised to provide for us. Jesus talked a lot about that, especially in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 and 6, right? God has promised to look out for us and take care of us in general. Has he promised that we'll never have problems? No. Has he promised that everything in life will be easy? No. But you know what he has promised? Like Luke said, God has promised that someday we will reach a place where that is the case. After this very short life that is over before you know it, before you even get started, this life ends. On the other side of the commercials is the main event. God is leading us to rest. God is leading us to a destination where we will have, like Revelation, at the end of the Revelation tells us, that there will be no more sickness, no more pain, no more death, no more suffering, no more hardship, no more working and toiling away for nothing, just to see all that money disappear. No more struggling in your relationships with other people, with people being selfish, with people lying to you and manipulating you and mistreating you. No more abuse, no more violence, no more war, no more greed. No more of any of that. We will live in God's presence forever, secure and safe and whole and complete. And we will live the life that God created us for. And there will be nothing to stand in the way of that. And if we hold on to the hope that that is what's on the other side, we can withstand anything. I know people that have drifted away from Jesus because they gave up on that hope. They stopped believing God's promises. And they started to question whether God was going to come through, and they've drifted away from God, and they've left the faith. And I pray that they'll come back, but they might not. It doesn't have to happen to you and me. But what is going to get you through this life? You have problems right now. I know it. You are struggling right now. I know it. What is going to get you through those struggles is if you hold on to the rope. You hold on to God's promises. You hold on to the belief that it is going to get better, and you trust God and take Him at His word that it won't always be this way. I know it's hard right now, and it's going to be hard at times. It's probably going to get harder. We're going to go through our ups and downs just like we always do. But if we trust that God is with us, and we trust that on the other side of this, all of His promises really will be fulfilled. If we hold on to that hope, that is what will get us through right now. I know sometimes we find our own version of hope to get us through the thing we're going through. Sometimes we can't find a version of hope to hold on to, and we despair, and we give up, and we get depressed. But God has given us a true hope, a hope that, like Romans 5 says, does not disappoint. And if we will just hold on to it, if we will just trust God and take Him at His word and take Him seriously, we will stay close to God's presence. We will not drift away. And we will spend all eternity in God's presence just like He promised. That is waiting for us. And that is real. That is the answer to what you're going through right now, is to remember that this life is short, but on the other side of it is an eternity. And if you hold on to that hope, you can get through what you're going through right now. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your hope. God, we thank you for your promises. God, you do not lie, and just to be safe, to reassure us, you've gone out of your way to give us assurance that your promises are good and that we can count on them. But God, I pray that you would help us to do that today. I pray that you would help us to take seriously what you've said, to trust you and to believe you, and to go boldly where you lead us to go, and to trust that you've got us covered, that everything's going to work out in the end. God, help us to trust that, to stop letting our fear and our anxiety get in the way of all that you've called us to, both in this life and in the next. God, help us to hold on to that hope that you've given us so that we can be anchored to your presence, so that we can go into your presence following the footsteps of Jesus. We thank you, Lord Jesus, for saving us. God, be near to us and draw us near to you. Help us to know you, Lord. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.